able to hear? Okay, perfect. All right, I'm going to put you on mute. We're just going to start the meeting, okay?
Sure.
All right, thanks. I'm putting myself on mute. Hello? Okay. All right, everyone. Welcome to the Tuesday, June 20th, 2023 Town of Monroe Planning Board regular meeting. Normally, we take a roll call. I don't know if you have our names, Barbara. Okay, if you'd please do the roll call for attendance. Yes. That's, you know what, Barbara, what we'll do is start at this end and just say your name and say, here, present.
Nicholas Napoli, here.
Jeff Manson, present.
Bonnie Franson, present.
Pat Shea, present.
Dylan Penn, present.
All right, thank you, and thanks for sitting in on. No worries, thanks for sitting in. So with that, I'm going to point out the fire exits. There are two behind me. There's one over here, the main entrance that you all came into, and then one to that side of me. Could we please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? All right, with that, the first item on the agenda, returning project, is Monroe Commons. If you'd all come up. Oh, thank you. Actually, I'm going to cede my copy to Sean. Perfect, I got it. Yep. All right, if you just want to give an overview and present where you are at this point in the process.
Sure. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. For the record, my name is Dan Richmond with the law firm Zarin and Steinmetz. I'm here with John Dahlgren from Tim Miller.
Talk into the mic, please.
The project's engineer and planning consultant. I think we'd like to first kick it off by having Vince present to you, based on comments and discussions with your board and staff. The site plan has been revised and new utilities lines have been proposed. So I'd like to kick it off with that, and then I'd just like to talk to you about the PDIS. We have submitted, we did get your comments a couple months ago, and we've been working very hard to fulfill the outstanding comments as identified by your board and staff. We have submitted several sections already. We anticipate being able to submit the remainder by the next submission deadline, which I believe is June 30th for your July meeting. But I then wanted to talk to your board about the process. So perhaps the board could start, or your staff could start reviewing the sections we have already submitted, including land use and zoning, traffic and transportation, and community facilities. And so that we can, it's a large DIS, so that we can kind of get certain sections put aside, hopefully, or if there need to be further comments, we can address those as soon as possible. But first, Vince, if you'd like to.
Good evening. I handed out a little plan with some colors which will help go along with my narrative. We're providing two access connections into VMG. We have an upper connection in the northeast portion of the property, and then a lower connection to the southwest behind the Broggen Mann building. On grading plan 3 of the plans that were submitted, which is the fourth sheet, drives, excuse me. The profiles are shown on the 7th sheet, which is the profile sheet 3 for both of those connections. Connecting the sidewalks to both facilities also through those connections. As requested, 5-foot landscape islands have been provided to the rear parking areas for the 2nd and 3rd floor parking levels. The front lower level drop-off area provides for a 20-foot drop-off. Additionally, provided more landscape area in the front of the building. Coverage calculations are now at 74.4%. The water main connects into VMG through the upper access drive. The water loops around the building, and as requested, we're providing fire hydrants that the fire chief wanted, along with 2 fire department connections into the building. A grease trap and pump station will be provided with a force main to the gravity sewer up behind the building. This gravity sewer will then connect into the VMG facility. Lastly, the SWIP revisions include underground storage utilizing 60-inch diameter pipe for storage. These are the main changes to the plans since they were last provided.
Vince, what's the revision date on those?
Revision date on the large plan?
Okay.
And I mean, we're just, and in the spirit of trying to promote feedback from your board.
John, did you want to, I didn't know if you also wanted to present before we go to our consultants.
Wanted to add that on May 25th, we submitted, as Dan indicated, the land use and zoning section, transportation and traffic, historic and cultural resources, and community facilities and services. And the traffic appendices, or an appendix, traffic report, which has been updated to include the new driveways, so that the traffic report is totally revised and taking some traffic out of problematic intersections near 9-incher and that's improvement overall for the project to have these connections and the pedestrian connections too, I should add. Improve connection to the neighboring residential development. I also want to just add for the board's information that a full geotechnical study has been completed, and we're revising the geology section and groundwater section to reflect the findings of that geotechnical study, which included numerous borings and soil test pits, and the stormwater practices in management had to be revised somewhat to, based on the results of the geotechnical study. So that's also going to be reflected in the geology and stormwater sections. So a lot of updates are pending, and you'll receive those.
Okay, so we don't have that report yet. At this point, it'll be submitted with the next round of the DEIS? Okay.
We're hoping that that the next submittal will be the final and have a complete PDIS for your boards and your staff's review. But again, what we'd like is if your staff could at least start reviewing the sections that already have been submitted, and if we could review the sections sort of on a rolling basis or as they are submitted, would enable us to keep moving this project, which has a lot of moving pieces moving forward.
Thank you. Sean, do you want to start as far as any comments?
Sure. So obviously, as Vince has explained, the two pedestrian and vehicular access points have been added to the VMG property. What we will need is the updated grading plans from VMG in order to verify that the grading will, be adequate in those areas. In addition, and very similar to what happened in the village of Woodbury, the grading extends obviously and is dependent on that neighboring property. So from a seeker perspective, what needs to be updated in the DEIS to coordinate those approvals in those adjoining properties? And I defer to Ash on that point. Rather small, but it was a new addition to the plan on the east side of the property, to the east of the building, over by the loading docks. There was like a staircase shown extending towards the
I believe that's just the hatched out area because that's where we're going to place the grease trap.
it was further off the parking, even further east. I don't think it's shown on this plan. It's on the plans that were submitted by the deadline. Like the grass. Proposed grading, I think it's called out as stairs there, isn't it?
Yeah, it says proposed six-foot wide nature walk stairs.
Hey, we're planning on putting a walking trail. Are we still doing that, John? Yeah, that's to get access to part of the walking trail that's going to go over in that area.
Okay, so that'll have to be updated in the coverage calcs, as well as, it looks like it's kind of ends, but there's a line indicating that it extends further. So I just trying to understand the extent of that trail. One suggestion that I had, and just for you guys to merely look at, I don't know if it can be eliminated, but there's two access points to Nininger, as well as the two to VMG. I'm not sure if the second to Nininger is necessary, but I obviously, defer to you guys into reviewing the fire code as well as your internal access with tractor trailers, whether or not that can be eliminated. It may help on the lot coverage calculation.
Yeah, based on preliminary discussions, I think.
Okay. And I know no utilities were shown on the plans that were previously submitted, but there was one spot on the upper left-hand corner of the project that, I brought to your attention with regards to drainage. We don't have to go dive into that. And then the last big thing was just discussing with Ashley and Aaron on how the board should handle the partial resubmission of the DEIS, considering that the DEIS has not been deemed complete by the planning board.
Ashley?
Just a couple things. First, with the change to now connect to the adjacent parcel, it will, I don't know if the applicants explored what approvals would be necessary from the village. The Village of Kirkstall was previously identified as an interested agency, but now either the village board and/or potentially the village planning board are going to be involved agencies. So in the past, when you had the Village of Woodbury had been identified later on as an involved, you did a supplemental lead agency notice. You could do the same here. We just need to know which agencies from the village would be approving those actions.
Ashley, while you're on that point, and you might be covering it, I think that joining project was subject to seeker. So I guess the other question would be, to what extent does any changes to that subdivision affect their own seeker approval process? But I guess that's something for them to figure out. But we're kind of now encroaching into that seeker process, so I just kind of want to give that some thought.
As far as the partial DEIS submission, I think, and it's up to the board how you want to proceed. I envisioned that the consultants would not be giving any further completeness comments until the full DEIS is resubmitted, rather than a piecemeal approach. I think Aaron's on the line as well if he wants to speak to this and any other items that he has.
On that point, our thinking was that certain consultants who are handling discrete areas, there's no need for them to be held up with certain sections that are not relevant, where you're still waiting.
Speak into the mic, please.
So for example, there are discrete sections that I believe could be fielded to particular consultants. As John mentioned, we submitted, for example, land use. And for example, the traffic section could be addressed by your traffic consultant without awaiting further submission. The same with the community facilities of Stark. And again, we anticipate submitting the remainder sections over the next couple of weeks.
So at the end of June, by our in-by date, we're going to get one full submission?
Active.
Okay. So practically speaking, it's June 20th. So,
It is June 20th.
yeah.
You're telling me the submission deadline.
No. So, no. But I'm not sure what the submission deadline is, but it's 10 days away. And so people going on vacations, I don't know how practical it is, but we'll see what's been submitted and what people can address, and we'll take a look at it. While we're on the subject of consultants, I know that Karen Arndt reached out to me, and I don't know if she included Steve Esposito on the communication, but I think we had all discussed, and I thought that Steve had talked about, and we agreed that there would be a more collaborative approach as far as the landscaping for this site, and she hasn't heard or talked to Steve, as far as I recall. I don't know if that's happened yet, but if you could reach out to him and just make sure he reaches out to Karen, because that was an important component of all of this as well, to get some landscaping in there, given the extent to which it's being graded out.
Taking the landscaping very seriously, and I thought we had been communicating that there have been full lines of communication. We'll certainly make sure that she's contacted for her input.
Okay. Ashley, anything else? All right. Aaron, do you want to give us your perspective?
Recording in progress.
Well, if we can find Aaron. I unmuted, but I may be. Why isn't my Zoom not coming up? Aaron's muted. I'm sorry?
I'm here.
Thank you. So submission date, 9 days away. Okay, Aaron, did you want to add anything as far as reviews and traffic, et cetera, and the new connections?
Oh, I didn't hear it. Was there a discussion before I just got put back on?
So perhaps you can quickly, Vince, just touch upon connections and traffic and where we are?
Sure. We have two connections into VMG, an upper and a lower connection. The water is connected into the upper connection to VMG and loops around the building. The sewer, we have a grease trap and a pump station, which flows to the back of which is force main to the back of the building to a gravity sewer that runs around the back of the building and down into VMG. The lower connection ties in behind the Brocken Mann building. Is there anything?
No, I just want to make sure Aaron heard that.
I'm familiar with the latest plan. I have it open in front of me too, and I guess I can give an update on where we are with stuff.
Sure.
So we did receive some materials that were submitted for the May 25th deadline. We got those about a week and a half later. So we've been working on the traffic since then, heavily focusing on the traffic to be able to give comments back by the end of this month. So probably by the end of next week, we should have those back. We're looking at the revised traffic study, the revised traffic DEIS chapter, and the response to comments memo that Creighton Manning put together. That covers comments that we had issued back in December, and also the completeness review comments too, I believe, all at once. We're just looking at those responses. They also submitted a few revised DEIS chapters, land use, community facilities, historic, and the traffic. So we took a quick look at those revised chapters. There's still some placeholders in there. I think they've made an attempt to address some of those comments. In talking with Ashley, I think it might make the most sense to just try to get the full submission. There's like 18 other chapters that we still need. There's 4 other consultants reviewing this with me. So it might be most efficient to just have their updated EIS when it's ready, memorializing all these changes that are proposed now, the new access, the sewer and water, and just all those chapters that we still need in order to review for completeness. So the update I have is that we'll work on getting the traffic review definitely for the end of this month. But I think the rest of the DEIS we still need before we can align on completeness.
So are there any changes will there be any changes to the traffic, or the traffic is the traffic and that's what's being submitted?
Traffic is now the traffic, yes.
Okay.
So you have that complete.
So it sounds like AKRF has gotten a jump on that, and that's a big hurdle. So I think some of those other sections are kind of lesser than traffic. So thank you for that, Aaron. Did you have any questions for the consultants?
No, I looked over Sean's memo that he sent in, and we're in agreement about possibly having the applicant take a look at that secondary access on Inninger, if it's really needed or not, considering we have already a primary entrance and then you have the 2 connections next door. If that's still needed or not, we would agree with that. Taking a look at that. Otherwise, I think we might have, I don't know if you already discussed this before I jumped on, but what types of coordination or otherwise related to KJ that we need now that there's a connection to that site. Obviously, involving them, adding them in as involved agency for the EIS might make sense, as well as having the applicant come back to us with a list of what they see as the possible approvals that are going to be needed from KJ, including possibly a site plan amendment for the VMG project. I was thinking, but again, I think the applicant can probably get started with getting back to us on that. In talking with Ashley, I know the KJ code isn't readily available. It's hard to find exactly what kind of requirements there might be, but just off the top of my head, if we're proposing access into that site, it's already under construction, I'm wondering if they need to have some kind of an amended site plan looked at too with KJ.
Thank you. So I think at a minimum, we'd probably want some confirmation from KJ that says what their expectations are in terms of their own site plan review and approval process. And then, obviously this is really, the connection has implications mostly for the traffic. So from an impact perspective, I think that's being addressed. I think we'll need to touch upon really the need to, we had, KJ is involved or interested? Okay. So I guess the first thing, just to get it going so it isn't lagging, is what we need to do to be able to inform them of the changes, and that then, makes them now, escalates them from interested to involved agency.
So if you want to authorize the circulation of a supplemental lead agency notice upon the applicant's identification of which village boards or which village officers have approval authority, we could do that. That way, if you could just get me that list, whether it's the Board of Trustees, I mean, we could always name more than might be, but
Right.
I could think of potentially the Village Planning Board. I don't know if
Do they have a ZBA?
the Highway
do you know?
Department or...
We'll look into that, but I guess this supplemental notice, this would just go to the Curious Joe and any agencies that are involved there. Is that the intent?
It would just go to, yeah.
Yeah, it's just to make sure we've informed them. And then what I would like is to attach a sheet that shows the layout so that they see the connection into the adjoining property. So as part of that notice, again, to inform them of what's going on. And I don't know if we circulate it with the EAF.
Include the application, the EAF, and then the latest plan that was just submitted, which shows the connection.
Okay. Planning board members, do you have any comments on that, or would you agree that we should move forward on having that supplemental circulation, given the fact that KJ is now an involved agency? Nick?
I have no comments.
Okay.
I think a supplemental submission makes sense, and I think we ought to do that as soon as possible and keep the process moving.
Yeah, I agree. Pat?
Given that I ride on Nininger quite often, I would be concerned about those two outlets there. You already have one street light now. I'm wondering if there's going to be a need for another street light with the amount of traffic flow. But I guess our traffic study will find out. So.
Thank you. And you're okay for us to circulate for this supplemental?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Dylan?
I'm aligned.
Okay, thank you. So we'll get that going.
Want to just do a motion to authorize the circulation of a supplemental lead agency notice?
Sure. Would someone like to make that motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Barbara?
Nick Napoli, aye.
Jeff Manson, aye.
Bonnie Franson, aye.
At Shea, aye.
Dylan Penn, aye.
All right, with that, the motion carries. I did want to just bring up, while we have our traffic consultant here and the engineers, so and then we'll get the planning board in terms of comments they may have with regard to the latest circulation. So with these connections, I'm guessing that it's supposed to help with the flow to avoid traffic then going out onto Nininger and then coming back on Nininger, because there'll be this direct connection. So what I would want to understand on the adjoining site is the connection itself, because it looks like the upper is coming through an area that's a parking lot, and it may just be you superimpose this because this is what's there. But the way, I can't tell if that's a full access or if there's parking on the upper, perpendicular parking. And then on the lower, it looks like there's definitely perpendicular parking on the lower access. So my concern is that we have now this major flow going back and forth, and we have, you know, perpendicular parking spaces in this little collector. So I just want to make sure that as we go through the process, we're not just looking at this site, but specifically how, once it enters into the adjoining site, that it makes sense, you know, that somehow traffic isn't going to be impeded, and therefore they'll still go out to Ninninger, because it just is, you know, too hectic there. So that's my particular comment about the changes to take into consideration. I'll go to my left. Nick, do you have any comments that you want to express?
No, not at this time.
Jeff?
I did have an opportunity to review the submissions to the revisions, and a few notes on that. Figure 3-3, where it's talking about the hotels that are in existence in the area and the coming hotels. Number 9 is labeled on the figure Hollywood Suites, but in the narrative, it's called out as a proposed Homewood Suites. I think that's the correct label for that. Section on page 9-2, one of the notes is that bicycle use is virtually non-existent on Ninninger, and having biked a number of times on Ninninger, that's probably a good thing. But I have started to observe on Larkin Drive, for example, more scooter use, both motorized and non-motorized. And that's something just to take into consideration. We're between that, e-bikes, we're starting to see some more alternate transportation, which is both climate-friendly and wallet-friendly. So I think we're going to see an increase in those kinds of things. I think that's a real part of the benefit to the entrances coming through VMG, is that most likely anyone on that mode of transportation or walking will try and come through that way. It's just going to be a much easier transport than coming up and down Ninninger. 9-8 talks about development that's coming in the adjacent area. So there's a total of, it sounds like 3,740 planned units in the village of KJ. We know that 1,600 of those are in the VMG development. But in looking at where those other units are going in, many of those are in walking distance of Monroe Commons or a short car ride from there. In addition to that, we have the 192 residences in Woodbury Junction, and we know we have just off of just past Larkin Drive, 138 townhouses approved in Bald Hill. So it certainly shows that there's significant development going on in the area adjacent or close to this facility, and points to need, you know, from what I'm reading, that it would really help to have another commercial center right in that area where so many residents are going to be moving into. I haven't noticed in any of the submissions or any of the plans a circulation diagram showing the ability of fire vehicles or tractor trailers to circulate. I know that's something we often look at with site plans. With that in mind, on 929, it still talks about that the bus companies locally may prefer to stop on Ninninger. I'm still strongly opposed to the idea of bus stops on Ninninger for Monroe Commons. My feeling is that fire trucks and tractor trailers can circulate, so can buses. The way, right on the cover sheet, it calls out bus and taxi drop-off area. I think you've really provided for a nice ability for buses to fairly easily circulate into the property, drop off shoppers and people who are going to the offices, and move right back out of the facility. Not only is Ninninger dangerous, frankly, it's one of the more dangerous roads in the area, there's not good pedestrian access between Ninninger and the building. There's been all kinds of provision built in to get residents out of VMG in a pedestrian mode or other non-motorized types of access in what looks to be as safe of a way as possible. From Ninninger, I don't even see how you might design that in. So I just kind of want to state that again. And I'm wondering if we know, my assumption is that there'll be bus service right going through VMG once it's fully built out, if not already. And I was wondering if that might run right to Monroe Commons as well. That would certainly be beneficial for local residents. So if we're talking with the bus companies about where they're going to want to stop and what their routes are going to be, if they're already planning on going through VMG, it would be great if they could swing right around to the front of the building and keep on going. That's my input so far.
Thank you very much. We appreciate your comments. Very helpful.
Thank you. Pat, do you have any comments?
No, Jeff asked the question I was going to ask, so.
Thank you. Dylan? Okay. So those are the comments at this point in time.
Thank you very much. Again, it's our goal to submit a complete DEIS on June 29th. Again, I would just reiterate, I think it would be helpful, as Mr. Manson did, we could be provided comments from consultants on sort of a rolling basis, or whatever sections we've submitted by that time, we have comments back, so we can keep this, process going, so that we can get to completion sooner.
When you submit, will you be submitting updated plans, or the May plans are what'll stand for now?
We are not planning to submit the final plans till the July submission.
Till the July submission, okay. So for
Fully completed plans for July.
Okay, but, so for now, the DEIS, in terms of what it analyzes, is relying on the May, so there won't be significant changes that would be discrepancies between the two?
Oh, no,
Okay.
updated, but in order to complete the finalization, tax statement updated based on the current.
Okay.
DEIS will follow the plans, and they'll be consistent, so that you should have the complete package.
Okay. So for completeness, is the site plan an element for completeness in terms of being a formal appendix? Was it called out in the scoping document?
I think it was, yes.
It is called out, okay. So just be aware, if it's part of the scoping, then it has implications for timeframe for that completeness review. So we can start on the DEIS, but sounds like the site plan's still part of the DEIS as well.
Authorize the consultants to start reviewing what's submitted?
Well, they have started, because I know Aaron was just explaining how he has been looking at the traffic study, so they have been looking at things, and honestly, 9 days, I think we'll just be reviewing it. Yeah.
Yeah, so the rest of the DEIS is coming June 29th, is that what I heard?
Yes.
I think we'll just, once we get the whole thing, we can circulate it to the other consultants, Frank Etchell, David Tompkins, and we could have everybody start reviewing their respective pieces of it, including what AKRF did, and, against those comments, and follow up with another comment memo
If you
on
have,
that submission. I think we would just hold off on providing any comments on the 3 chapters that came in with the traffic on this round, since we're focusing on traffic pretty heavily right now.
You have the traffic
we'll just-
section, that's a discrete section.
that's what they're reviewing.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, I'm saying if you could continue with that, so we have his comments by the end of the month, as he
Right.
said.
They're working on it.
Appreciate it.
With regard to, are there just standalone documents or studies that you want to submit for the record? I mean, if you have a geotech done, or if you have particular studies done, does it make sense to just get those in? I don't know what, Frank has to review. I don't know if there's something that he didn't have that he might now have. And again, it's not formal, but sometimes scheduling allows for someone to review. I mean, They don't have to till we get it complete, until we get it fully submitted, but it just may work out with their schedule to look at some of these.
But right now, I think it's probably best to have the geotechnical study and the geology section and the groundwater section all together, kind of,
A package.
they're all connected.
Okay.
And refer to, different sections, so I think that's best.
We
Is
should have
this,
those by the,
Is-
It'll be the,
is the SWIP done? It will be done, okay, but it's not done yet. Okay.
But you're going to submit the SWIP without the plans? Okay.
If I submitted the plans, they're going to need a lot of revisions, a lot of red lines,
Yeah.
markup, so it really makes no sense submitting the plans.
Well,
Okay.
I'm just saying it's not going to be a complete SWIP review without the plans, so, yeah.
Or it'll be complete.
Right, okay.
Okay. So, anything else? Sean, Ashley?
plant the seed with the board that maybe, since this is a large project, when we have, everything together, maybe a special meeting with the board.
We can poll them. If you can make that request again, but through the mic.
My request was that the board, be in light of the size of this project, the complexity, the moving parts, perhaps schedule a special meeting to go over completeness comments in the next round to help expedite things.
So are you referring to just as a separate agenda item, or are you trying to accelerate?
Trying to see if we,
Okay. We
I mean,
can,
because I think it could have the potential to consume your entire board meeting.
we'll give it consideration, and I'll talk to the board members, talk to our attorney. We first have to see what comes back, okay? And how quickly our other consultants can start their review to be able to get the comments. So, again, we'll give that consideration. Anything else on your end? No? Applicant? You're good? Okay. All right, thank
Bonnie,
you.
I would-
Oh,
Thank you,
yes.
Ms.
Hold- Aaron?
Sure, so if it's coming in on the 29th, would we be expected to have everything reviewed by the 18th of July? Is that, but I just did hear them request a special meeting, but right now it would be the July meeting, probably the July 18th meeting. The regular meeting, not the workshop.
I-
We would try-
I think we're going to see what comes in, and we'll talk to Ashley, and we'll see what the timeframes are realistically for people to be able to do the review. I don't know if we could do preliminary comments, we just have to see, because in the midst of all this, we have 4th of July, and I know some people go away, including myself, during that time period. So I just want to see everybody's schedules and see whether that's realistic. And we have 30 days, I think, for the second submission for a DEIS review. I believe it's 45 and then 30 for the second submission for completeness review. Okay. So,
That's right, yeah.
all right. Yeah, again, we're going to look into it, Aaron, see what makes sense for everybody.
All right.
All right? Thank you. All right, thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
Bye, Aaron.
Good night, everybody, thank you.
George, did you say something? I thought I heard George. All right. Yeah. All right. Next item on the agenda is 7 Springs Road in Monroe.
They actually are no longer on.
Oh, they're not, okay. All right, okay, meeting's over. Homeland Towers. Good evening. Oh, look at that, samples. Did you just pull them from the Strauss site, or did you just pull your samples off the Strauss site, or?
Pretty.
I actually have Cell trees they make this for me, showing the 3 different types of
needles that they have.
Okay.
So standard dark or dark dusted, which is just a combination. So it's the first time I'm actually using this. So if
Ah.
you guys want to check that out, I can pass it around. or
Exciting.
however you like.
All right, so where are we in the process? I believe you got your ZBA decision.
Correct.
Yes?
Again, for the record, my name is David Kenny, attorney Snyder, representing the applicants Homeland Towers and Verizon Wireless. With me to my right is Vincent Xavier, regional manager of Homeland Towers. Yes, at our last meeting with the zoning board, they issued the use variance for the proposed facility. So now we're complete with our zoning board review, and we're back at the planning board for, I believe, a final review on the plans that we were submitted on May 30th. As well as we did submit a letter recently requesting approval of a tree contribution fund that we offered for the tree removal.
Just as a preliminary matter, it appears that you did not close the public hearing at your last meeting, so before we forget to do that, does not look like anyone from the public is here to comment on the application, so it would be appropriate to make a motion to close the public hearing.
Okay. If there are no comments? No comments. I will make a motion to close the public hearing. May I have a second?
Second.
Nick, you want to?
Napoli? Aye.
Jeff Manson, aye.
Bonnie Franson, aye.
Dylan Penn, aye.
Well, actually, one more just preliminary item to get out of the way. The shot clock was extended previously to this evening, so I did propose, I spoke with the applicant's attorney and proposed the date of July 18th for an extension, figuring that you would authorize a resolution this evening. So if the board was so inclined to approve a motion to extend the shot clock to July 18th, 2023, and to authorize me to sign that letter agreement with the applicant.
And is the applicant okay with that extension?
Absolutely. We've already signed the copy of the letter.
Okay, perfect. So what was the date again?
July 18th.
I will make a motion that we extend the time period related to the review of this application regarding the shot clock to July 18th. May I have a second?
Second.
Nick?
Nick Napoli? Aye.
Jeff Manson, aye.
Bonnie Franson, aye.
Pat Shea, aye.
Dylan Penn, aye.
Thank you. Anything else procedural to do right now, Ashley?
I believe that is it.
All right. Sean, you had some comments?
Did. A copy of that comment letter? I haven't seen it before.
Noreen was unexpectedly out, so apologize for not forwarding it to you.
So, since the last meeting, obviously, we went over the use variance that was granted by the ZBA. The MCC, the Monroe Conservation Commission, issued comments with regards to trying to reduce the limits of disturbance on the site by potentially eliminating some of the swales along the proposed driveway. I've reviewed that, and I suggest that the applicant's consultant review where the grading changes the path of drainage on the site. I'm not opposed to eliminating the drainage swales. I just don't know if you can eliminate all of them and continue to for the driveway to function properly, as well as allow the drainage to continue down its path that it was before pre-development. So I just ask that your engineer review that aspect.
Our engineer did review it. It's basically, again, we were asked by the arborist and the Monroe Conservation Commission to remove those bioswales, and our response was, we'd be happy to remove them as long as you didn't feel, or the planning board didn't feel, there was an engineering reason to have them. In our experience with these access drives, you really can't know until it's actually constructed, and then usually the way it is resolved is we'll just put extra gravel down in the areas where we see there's some extra runoff, and that's kind of the way we can protect it, other than having the swales. But adding the swales does increase the amount of tree removal, so we're kind of at a push-pull right here, and we're looking for direction from the board on how to proceed.
My suggestion, as I put in my comment, was that where the grade is significantly altered that some swale and a crossing, a driveway crossing with a culvert and a level spreader to allow the drainage to continue down the side of the hill, that those be added, not that the entire swales be eliminated, so that all of the water upstream of the driveway is then redirected down the hill towards the existing development.
We can definitely look at that again. You know, our engineer had the swales there for a reason as well. When we went back out there with him, because of the terrain out there, there's not a lot of spots, I believe, where there's actually a cross flow. Most of the things would naturally be coming down the hill anyway because the road is kind of going uphill. So I think
Which is different than pre-existing, and that hence my concern.
I was trying to go back and forth, trying to make the arborists
Yeah,
happy. You know?
I'm not suggesting that they have to be on the entire length of the road. I think just in certain locations they'll have to be added.
We'd be willing to accept as a condition swales or having the swales that Sean just asked for being proposed on next set of plans and have that be approved by Sean before it's signed and endorsed by the planning board.
We're not opposed to the swales at all.
Trying to make everybody happy.
We appreciate that. Board members, any thoughts? Anything you want to add? No? Seems reasonable? Okay.
Yes, though, just thinking related to that, if it's going to change the number of trees potentially, then you'll really have to have that shown for the next meeting so that,
So if your engineer
We know
wants
what the
to
estimate
schedule a
is.
meeting with myself to review that so that we can come to a conclusion before the next meeting, I'd be happy to do that.
Yeah, I think if you guys could coordinate, if the two offices, because the closer we are to having a resolution to it, it's just one less thing to worry about.
Absolutely agree. Have our engineer talk offline with Sean and see if we can come to a middle ground.
Yeah, that would be wonderful.
Additionally, just reviewing the RF engineer's comment memo or email rather, two things that came to light. The RF engineer suggested that the faux branches be added at the 40-foot above ground level location, whereas the plans have it at 59 feet. And then there was a suggested note that be added to any conditional final approval resolution that the board considers. So just looking to make sure that that's added. And then
Do you have
last,
that? Do you have that note?
I don't have it spelled out, but I have it in an email that I can forward.
Okay, or do you remember the gist of it?
it had to do with the thing technology, how the branches were going to be tapered, that kind
Okay.
of thing.
Right.
Okay, the
Make it
design of it,
look, yeah, exactly, to make it look more realistic.
naturalistic?
Right.
Okay.
We'll work out the swell thing separately, but similar to the proposed condition of the resolution. You know, I did bring an example of a branch distribution detail that we've used on other sites to basically show the way it is tapered. And that is the goal, as opposed to having just the toilet brush, as they call it.
Yeah.
So it is our intention to have it tapered anyway, so any condition you want to have to that effect, where once the tower is designed, we submit that to Sean for, you know, his blessing before a building permit is issued, you know, that would be more.
Well, I think visually, we would want to see, as a board, what it looks like. Unless you're getting into the fine details, just getting a sense of,
The actual tower gets designed.
It is fairly fine details, so we can make a drawing, but these actually stay.
yeah, please.
Passing around this is one that's been designed for another project. So each monopine is specifically designed for each site because you have different branch starting heights, you have different surrounding tree heights, and you have different equipment that's being proposed. But here, what they're laying out is they're showing the spacing for the branches, the height at which the branches are being proposed on. And the idea is what they're showing is that it's not uniform. There is going to be a tapered design, and it's going to make it more look natural. But you know, this information is usually included in a report or some structural drawings that go with the approved site plan, because these are specifically detailed for where each opening port would be for a branch and each length of that branch and where they're going. But we absolutely will design it for this site. And then with just respect to the starting height, I believe it was discussed at the last meeting, the reason why we were starting at that elevation was because from the surrounding vantage points, that would have been the lowest height where you have the branches meeting the top of the tree lines. So extending the branches further below the tops of the surrounding trees doesn't really add any benefit because those are already areas that are being screened by the surrounding vegetation.
Plus, there's not going to be any antennas at that height to block or cover anyway.
My concern would be less the viewpoint coming from Monroe and more down the back slope into, I guess, Chester and Blooming Grove, because as I remember from our site walk, the coverage was smaller and sparser in that direction. So do you ever do an asymmetric design where branches continue down one side of the pole? I don't know if that would work from an engineering standpoint.
No, and you know, when you look at this, it is a little bit hard to read, but you'll see like the numbers at the top, you know, and the squares, that's because they're, and you can kind of see them coming at a diagonal. It's because they're meant to kind of come as a diagonal down in order to create the effect that when you're looking at it, it's not just like a line of so you're going to have some on the other side in order to balance it out. I've never done a half thing like that before.
Yeah.
And there's a natural push-pull, so all of the branches that we're putting on adds mass to this tower. Again, we're building this tower as being designed for Verizon Wireless, but we do hope that there will be co-locators. The more branches you add, the more weight that you add to this tower, you're taking structural capacity away from future co-locators, and you're reducing the ability for this tower to have a second or a third co-locator.
I would just want to be confident that the branches are going down low enough that they'll provide screening from all access points, not just from, you know, the town and the village of Monroe.
One thing I point out, the screening is intended really to mask the antennas so they don't stand out so much. There's not going to be any antennas theoretically here below the 60 feet. So below that, all you're really screening is the 3-foot colored pole. So technically the screening, if you could see it, would be more visible than the pole alone itself.
I understand what you're saying, but would those additional branches just help it look more natural in the setting?
So again, the reason why that height was chosen was, again, it'll cover all of the antennas, but I believe that height was also chosen because from all the surrounding vantage points, that would get us below the tree line, but we can have that confirmed before we come back to the board.
I would just want to double check that, particularly from, because I know we moved it 50 feet closer to that side of the ridge line, and I just wanted to make sure that we were sensitive to that.
Absolutely, and we did further visual simulations after we did that relocation.
Okay.
And these monopine kind of design was done after that as well.
Great, thank you. Appreciate it.
Remind me, were there trees that we were adding back in, any kind of screening trees?
No real trees that planted because all of the ground-based equipment is not visible from anyone else at all anyway. So planting trees in the forest is going to be hard to keep them alive with the tree canopy. It's not going to provide any aesthetic screening, so we didn't. Even though, go ahead.
But to that point, there were those 3 large pine trees on the property that we moved the tower closer to, and those trees would actually screen the view from that blooming grove. So while we didn't plant trees, we were taking advantage of the trees that are on site.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to remember. If someone could take a picture of, and it is the Blooming Grove Chester side, I agree, because my recollection is when we were on the top of the hill toward the Monroe side, it was just because of the nature of the plateau, there were more trees, and that there was more of a sudden decline on the Blooming Grove Chester side where you had like actually really nice views out toward that valley. So if we can see them, they can see this. And
It's a steeper drop off on that side, so you don't get the coverage. It's so gradual going into the town, into the developed area where the homes are, and there's so many trees on that hillside. From the surrounding residences, you're never going to know it's there.
But actually, if you remember from our photo simulations, and I have them here, we did take photos from that side, from we got a 25 and 26 from that vantage point. And from photos 26, that was the one, this is on Quaker Hill Road at Old Quaker Hill Road. This one, again, the balloon was just here. We have with the monopine, again, the tree branches are coming down to the height.
Could you repeat, I'm sorry, the number
So
again?
this was photo 26. If you go to the,
Too far.
to make you go backwards, but if you go to the viewshed map,
This one?
yeah, right there. If you can see, 26 is right there with the green with those two arrows coming out of it, or the, yep, right there. So that's the vantage point from 26. We also have from 25 and 20. But if you can look at 26, which is what we did the photo simulations for, these were the ones where you saw the dumpsters in the foreground, and you had the trees right in the behind of it.
Is it Exhibit C?
It's figure C13, photo 26. In the photo simulations. Yeah, these are all the stock photos, and then we get to the photo simulations in Exhibit C. So this is Exhibit C. Yeah, it would be C13. That's the balloon. The next one should be on a pole. Or this is the leaf-off photos, and the one after this is the the balloon, and then you'll have the leaf off.
Yeah, but this was also the shot that I said, had someone probably walked a few more feet toward the fence. Well, there's perfect, actually. So you can see that.
Yep, and then if you keep going down, the main thing we're trying to show here is that's the monopine. The branches were coming below.
Well, look at, I mean, this is, and it's so hard because of the perspective. You can see those existing pines, but I think that's way before where the tower is. It's a little hard to tell.
Right, but that's the monopole right there. I think what we're trying to look at, though, is the monopine and see where because the branch height on the next photo, you can see the branch height comes below.
Yeah, it's a little hard to tell, honestly. And again, because I think it depends on where you're viewing it in perspective. While I don't know that it has to go to 40, I think we should just examine that a little bit more between now and the next meeting for the resolution.
Sure, we can do that. Ultimately, our goal is to have the branch height starting at the surrounding top of the trees so that there is a view of the branch height from any surrounding view. But I think
Yeah.
that's my point exactly, is I think it starts well above the 40 feet. So I think there's a room between where we have it at 59 and 40. But I think it is closer to our 59-foot mark, which is where the top of the trees are starting.
Is
or ending.
the location of the monopole right now marked out in some way with an X, or it's marked, right? I hadn't gone out a second time.
Yeah, there's a stake out there. in
There's a
the
stake
field.
out there?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, just to help, I might go out there again, just take a look.
Well, if you want to go out, let me know. I actually have to meet with the landlord next week anyway, so if
Okay.
you want to coordinate, I can meet with you.
I'll keep you posted.
Okay.
Okay, where were we?
Just had one more item. Just the need for an access and maintenance agreement from between the landlord and the applicant in order to, for the applicant to have access over the property to use the site.
Generally, we don't like to hand out our ground leases with private landlords. Any access and maintenance requirements would be in there. I can see what we can get you, but generally, we just don't like to have the full leases out there.
It could be redacted and just to, show that the access, and I've gotten them before, I think, for other applications where it's been, redacted and just showing the access provisions and.
Yeah, we don't need to know the financial
We could do it
conditions
two
of the
ways.
agreement, but,
we can do it a redacted way, but would it also be possible to submit one copy for review in camera rather than submitting that lease to the public record?
I'll defer to our attorney.
But I think you'd want to submit one that's redacted that way it is in the record.
Okay.
So,
But obviously, I'm not going to fight with you over the point, but there are other things in a lease which are
so
proprietary,
anything that,
you know.
you could redact anything
Redact
proprietary.
everything except for the access portion, because obviously we have access.
Or, I
but-
mean, anything that's, not proprietary.
I have a black marker, so if you want to send it to me, I'll make sure to cross it out.
That's the fastest way to get it redacted, send it to the judge, right? Not to bring it back to the photos, but there is one more I just wanted you to take a look at. This we didn't do a photo simulation for, so this is going to be in the section B. But if you go to photo 20, this was also
Photo
it's
20?
photo 20, figure B10. So it's going to be
Go
in
backwards.
this is just the photos. This wouldn't be involved with the photo simulations.
Okay.
But it's just another point from that across the way from the view from Blooming Grove. Because I think we had discussed, that's exactly it. One of the things is they're already looking at overhead power lines. So not only do they have these trees here, but all of their views that would be towards our facility would have to be across this similar public utility infrastructure. So I think that was originally one of the reasons why, not only why we're in Monroe, we want to protect the view shed of Monroe. I think it was already understood that they're already looking through public infrastructure if they're going to have a view of our tower. But again, we'll review our branch starting height.
Okay. Sean, anything else? No. Ashley?
Don't did get your GML response from the county. It was a local determination. There was 4 advisory comments on there. The ZBA use variance did have some conditions requiring input from the planning board as far as the branch design and the concealment measure. So all of those things should be spelled out in your resolution ultimately. So I know there's some samples here. If you wanted to look at those, discuss and pick one or whatever it is you would do there. The only other item, I had a few just cleanup things on the plans that could always be made conditions, but the other item was the tree removal. So the applicant did submit a letter proposing a $20,000 fee to the parkland fee for the trees being removed. I did speak with the applicant's attorney about it. My reading of the law and how you've applied it consistently in the past is that the fees required for every tree other than dead trees that have been confirmed by the arborist as dead or diseased, it's required for each tree that's being removed and not replaced. So you have the ability to alter the number of trees that are required to be replaced, but as far as the fee, that's a set fee for any tree that's not being replaced.
What is the status of the local law that was being worked on?
That is still before the town board. I believe the public hearing was adjourned to tomorrow night.
Okay. So at this point, the fee schedule is the fee schedule. It's still whatever exists. Okay. So do we have a full accounting then of the trees at this point and what the fee should be?
There is a tree inventory, I believe, based on that, it's 77 alive trees being removed, so it would be 57,750 unless they were going to change the plan to propose some replacement trees to balance it out.
Again, with the comments that we received regarding the swales, those numbers may be revised further if we have to add in swales and take out additional trees. Our reading of the code is basically, it says in the very beginning, and I understand council's point, is that it says that it should be replaced on a one-to-one basis or basis acceptable to the planning board. And then it states that for all trees that's not being replaced, that there should be a $750 per tree fee. However, our submission to the planning board was based on that first line in the section that it's on a basis acceptable to the planning board. We were asking the planning board to grant us some wiggle room here because we noted that the access drive was designed in part with requirements that the town imposed upon us to add the fire access turnoffs that created additional trees to be removed. We also took time to walk the site with the arborist, and we made sure that we routed the access drive that would take out several more trees in order to prevent the removal for larger or more identified as special trees. So we just want that to taken into account for our tree removal requirement, and note that, you know, we've been trying to work together with the town in creating this access drive, and some of those components of the access drive that were asked upon us are the reasons for the additional tree removal. That being said, you know, we're happy to accept as a condition of approval whatever the board seems is an appropriate amount for the tree removal.
There were changes that were made, but that's with any site plan, it's always going to go through changes, and that's completely within, you know, the board's jurisdiction to oversee those changes, and the applicant was agreeable. I just don't agree with, I agree that you could vary the amount that have to be replaced, but for whatever's not being replaced, so you could say 0 have to be replaced, but then for each one that's not being replaced, the code does require that fee. The other alternative would be for the applicant to appeal or apply to the ZBA for some type of relief from that.
We don't necessarily want to do that, but what we would try to do is we could probably try to see if there's any place on the property that we could add some trees and maybe reduce our required replacement through that by adding some trees on site. However, this is a densely vegetated property. I'm not really sure what benefit there is to achieve by adding more trees to this particular property, but if that's going to reduce our total cost, that's something we'll explore.
There's the option to place trees on another property as well, and then it's a reduced fee for those, I think $350 per tree.
I really don't understand how that's any help, because when we're going to be responsible for trees not on our property and also have to pay a fee, and then 2 years down the road when the green arborvitae are all eaten by the deers, we're going to have to go out and replace the trees, I think we'd just rather give you the money.
Just to explain, I think part of it was with regard to could be placed on another site. I know the MCC had worked in the past on planting trees in some of the parks in the town where there might be value, and frankly, you know, as you had said, it's not forested there, and they would actually benefit from some additional trees. So those kinds of projects were, I think, what were contemplated when they had prepared the tree law, just as background. I have a quick question. So I think we still have to resolve what the tree cost will be, but you're going to look at the numbers too because of the swales, et cetera. So we still have to land somewhere.
Absolutely. We just don't want this to be a gating item. So if it turns out that, you know, we're going to remove 77 trees, or based on adding the swale, it turns into 80 trees, if the board sets the fee at the $750, we'll comply with that. We're here asking for some consideration to what we've done so far and the amount of trees that are on this property that will remain.
Okay. Well, so from my perspective, and I'll ask the planning board members, on the one hand, I appreciate the flexibility you've had and shown to be able to relocate things and go out with the arborist and try and minimize the trees. On the other hand, this is the RPO zoning district, the Ridge Protection Zoning District, and views and forested views are really important here. So they're still being removed to some extent. So I think we have to take that into consideration, as well as ultimately the extent of visibility. And so I think we can continue to think on that, but let me ask my board members what their thoughts are in terms of, well, let me step back. I don't know that we have as much wiggle room, because I think our planning board attorney is telling us that the flexibility is built into how many trees are replaced, as opposed to what we're counting as what requires a $750 fee. So I think that's really where it comes down, is if you wanted to reduce the number, then we'd have to look at where to plant trees, essentially, on the site or elsewhere.
That end, I'm not sure if we were to pay the full $57,000, where that money goes exactly. Does that go to plant trees? Otherwise, instead of me being responsible for planting trees on town property, could I pay separately into a separate fund for the town to use to plant its own trees?
Is it in a fund that's to be used
That
earmarked
is what
for
it's for.
replanting trees?
That is what, no, we understand interpretation by your council, I guess.
Okay.
Is there any bonus points we can get for one very large metal tree that we're going to plant? Maybe we can get that way? Had to bring some levity.
That's like asking for the Charlie Brown tree to be.
Well, hopefully it's going to be much more filled in than the Charlie Brown tree.
Well, you
Although
say
we'll
that,
put red bulb on it if you want.
that's what actually made me ask my attorney to kind of look into this more, is because, yes, it's every tree over 6 inches that you have to replace. But when you go out there, even if it's not dead, some of the 6-inch trees, they're in a canopy. Maybe there's like a couple branches. They're not very high quality ones either. So to pay the same amount for every tree, regardless of quality of the tree, seemed odd to me. And I wanted to see if there was any way we could work that out, because $60,000 for tree replacement is significant. And we had to ask. But yes, we're not going to go, whatever you decide, we're not going to go back to the ZBA, and we're not going to make that a fighting point or anything. It's just,
Is the
Seems
70,
silly.
is the 77 trees based on what is concluded and already subtracts out what's dead and dying?
Correct.
Okay.
So yeah, it was 81 trees, and 4 of them were determined to be dead by the arborist. And again, these are the trees that meet the caliber requirement by the code. So these are all the trees that are over the 6 inches.
Okay. Is there a section we should look at in particular, Ashley? Here it is. Oh, no, it's 750.
784.
Okay. Oops. So this is the section for the benefit of the board members that we're referring to.
That first line that got us thinking that you may have some wiggle room, but we understand your council's interpretation.
Yeah, and we've actually had, I think, a couple projects already where we've come to this conclusion of how to interpret that section, so.
that's what you've done consistently in the past. I don't even want
Okay.
$1 per tree. Final count to be determined.
Okay. All right. I think that's resolved then. Board members, do you have comments at this point in time? And I think we want to also specifically get to the design, right? Finally, the selection of the needles, is that why we're?
This is the big color presentation Vince has for you.
And Nick, if you have any other comments, feel free to share them as we go down.
Again, these would be the faux pine needle branches, so this would be on each of the branches that are extending out. The goal here really is which color do you think would be better blending in with your surrounding tree foliage?
The one on the right, the combination is what we usually go with. Breaks things up a little bit, sees a little more real.
Put some purple in there?
Trying to work in the high school football colors right after.
Oh, there you go. We'll have one big Monroe Woodbury.
Purple and white.
There you go.
Problem solved.
Went from hiding it to showing it.
Yeah.
What are the needles made out of? What's the material?
I think it's some type. Yeah, some type of plastic vinyl, but I can have that confirmed by the next
The only reason why I ask is if there's ever an opportunity in the future for future sites to do a recycled material or some sort of recycled stream for that material.
Good point. We buy these from a manufacturer, so we can absolutely ask them if they have any process for that, and if that's something they can do in the future, maybe we can encourage them.
Nick, do you have any other comments?
No comment.
Jeff? No. I have one question on the ZBA determination. It says, "General equipment and facilities shall be located as advised and determined by the planning board. Ground equipment shall be surrounded in all visible directions by shrubbery, landscaping, and/or other approved concealed methods and shall be properly maintained." Obviously, we weren't at the meeting. Did they expect to have any kind of plantings, or what was that condition?
No, I think that may have been a standard condition that they include for most applications. It was discussed that we would put in the black vinyl coated fence, and that seemed to be in agreement with the board because there's natural screening here. There really wouldn't be any benefit to putting shrubbery or landscaping around this because it would really just be for the property owner benefit whenever he looked at the site.
Okay. Pat, any comments?
No comment.
Dylan?
None that need answered. I was aligned with Jeff on some of his questions earlier, and then ultimately I came to conclusion. It sticks out from a height perspective, whether we do the leaves configuration or not, top to bottom, I think is less of an impact than anything, so no comment.
All right, so I think we have to finalize that, where it lands, where it may not be 40, but let's kind of, if we have a chance to take a look, maybe even get out to the side or otherwise drive around a little to get a sense of should it come down a little farther or not.
It'd be hard even driving around.
Yeah. Right.
They have to go based, like, Saratoga Associates. Other things now. If there are any type of equipment, they must be within the branch canopy, so that there won't be any antennas or
I think, I don't know, I'd like to get out to the site, and I think it's as simple as just leaving a little space open if necessary for the resolution. I don't think it's not going to, from my perspective, slow down making a decision. I just want to have at least opportunity to remind myself of what it looked like, and possibly going actually up there and then comparing it to some of the vegetation around.
If you wanted me at the next, I could bring up this drone that I have. We have this orange drone. I actually just got my pilot's license for it. So we can go up there. I can fly that to the different heights. I don't know how long I could keep it in the air while you drove around, but if there was like a specific viewpoint, maybe we can do
that
something
might be
with
helpful.
that to help.
Okay.
Yeah.
We'll see if planning board members anybody else wants to join.
We'll also have our engineer double check the tree heights. I think they were confirmed that this would be below everything, but we'll have them double check, and we'll be ready to set on a height number at the next meeting.
Okay, and then in the meantime, you'll resolve the question of the swale and
Correct.
work with Sean on that.
We'll have, the engineer that's drafting the plans speak directly offline with Sean to see if we can figure out a way to put smaller swales or some minimal swales in there that achieve the goals that Sean's trying to achieve, as well as minimizing the tree removal, try to make everybody happy.
Okay.
And just to that end real quick too, that's not going to be a sticking point either. If Sean says he wants a swale somewhere, I'm just going to put the swale somewhere.
Okay.
So that's how that's going to get resolved. So.
Someone has to tell Dennis.
Did the board have a preference on color? And also, I don't think you had picked the color for the pole. Do you recall?
No, I thought we had
I think you had
discussed
reviewed
Thunder
did.
Gray.
Thunder Gray.
It's gray.
Yeah, it was Thunder
Okay.
Gray, I think we had
Yeah.
discussed, but I don't know if they
Yeah.
took an action to say that.
And I know as we went down, I think you were pointing to the rightmost, right?
Like bachelor number 3, yeah.
Yeah.
I think the dark dusted.
I was number 3.
Dark dusted?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, what were you, Pat? Did you
Can
have
you
a
submit
preference?
a picture of this? so that
No,
we
I'd
have
like
it
the
like-
one that would provide the least contrast between that and the background.
Okay.
Because I noticed on some of these poles, they're all green, and in the wintertime, I mean, the contrast is too much, so.
Onto the mic.
Any of these probably stick out against the sky in the winter the same amount. I don't know how much better the standard one would help in the winter necessarily.
I kind of went with the right one only because it seemed to be in between. It wasn't too light, not too dark. It had a little bow shades in it.
It's closest to what those types of trees look like in the woods. The combination of the green and the brown is really, so
And even, right now, we're in the middle of June, middle of the bloom season. Not every tree is pure green. You're going to have some trees that have a little bit of brown in there. And if you're sticking out some of the branches, you have a little brown. So I do think that that's probably the best design, that we can have a little combination of both. But that and the thunder gray together, it's not like you're going to actually see the thunder gray within. And from such a far vantage point, you're not even going to see both colors. They're kind of going to blend in together. And I think it'll create a color that's more familiar with those that drive in the surrounding area to what they see on the foliage, especially the trees that are non-monopines. You're going to see a lot more that are kind of that brown and green together combination.
Okay. Dylan, any thoughts?
I think from 70 feet, they all look the same to me, so I'm aligned with the board members.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah, I'm good with that one on the left.
Okay.
Good.
All right. I think that's it. So do we need to resolve to have you prepare a resolution? So I'll make a motion that we ask our planning board attorney to prepare a resolution of approval for us to consider at our next July 18th meeting. May I have a second?
second.
Nick?
Jeff Manson, aye.
Bonnie France and I.
At Shea, aye.
Dylan Penn, aye.
Okay, with that, motion carries. We'll work on a resolution. And I think,
Not to ask a question right at the end, but regarding the access and the maintenance, we're going to give you the lease for the access. As far as maintenance, you want what terms from the lease agreement? Or do you want Homeland Towers has like standard tower maintenance notes that we can provide? I'm just trying to make sure I provide what you're seeking.
Basically, there's like one line.
That's why I'm asking if they want the standard maintenance notes, which is like a little bit more specific about how we do the inspections and maintain. Or are you looking for just an agreement with the property owner for maintaining the access drive?
I think if you put whatever your requirements, what Homeland Towers requirements are for maintenance of the access drive on the plans as notes, I think that would suffice.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to find out, because what we have in the lease is different than what we're going to do, what we're required to maintain as far as our operation of our business is a little bit different than the relationship we have with our landowner and what we're required to maintain.
Right, I think whatever combination covers both of those would be appropriate.
Okay, thank you.
so I'll just add that the ZBA, one of their conditions was applicant shall regularly maintain and repair the structures and equipment in such a way and at such times and intervals as shall be defined in the site plan. So I think to the extent that you can give us some guidance on your typical, that will help with the site plan resolution.
Yeah, that's where I was leading. I wanted to make sure that that was the sought-after response for the maintenance comment, not something that's in our lease, because we have something that talks about how we regularly maintain these sites and our maintenance schedule, and I want to provide that. I think that's more what is being asked for.
I think from at least my perspective, I think in particular, you have to maintain the equipment to work. That's
Correct.
not our concern as much as you need to maintain the structure with the leaves and if they fall off, if the materials you have to be replaced, that aspect of it especially be maintained.
Absolutely, and Homeland Towers, operates many of these sites. We have standard maintenance schedules. We know very often if there's any faux branches that fall, the replacement for those, as well as what is the standard time frame for us when we need to walk the site and do inspections.
Okay.
Definitely give those so that could be incorporated per the ZBA's condition.
We will do so.
Okay. Thank you.
Very much.
Have a good night.
Have a good night.
Do you have Sean's direct contact, by the way?
All right.
It's on the letter.
So I think that's it. And we have minutes, but I don't know that this has been updated to eliminate the ones that we already reviewed. And some of them we may not be able to because of the fact that there's no way we're going to get a quorum. So I know a couple times they haven't dropped off even though they should have. So I'm just going to say we tabled this. I did ask Noreen, I had hoped that we would get the first set of June meeting minutes, but we didn't. So let's try and be up to date at the next meeting.
Sounds good.
All right, so with that, would someone like to make a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
May I have a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
With that, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you all.